The courthouse bathroom smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. James Rivera pushed his mop across the marble floor, watching dirty water swell into the drain, when he heard it. A woman sobbing behind the locked stall door. Not the quiet kind of crying. The desperate kind. The giving up kind. "Miss, you okay in there?" His voice echoed off the tiles. The crying stopped. Then a voice, raw and broken. "Just leave me alone." James had been cleaning these halls for 3 years. He'd seen 1,000 people walk through those courtroom doors, faces tight with worry. But something about this woman's voice made him pause. Made him remember his own sister's voice that terrible night 6 years ago when the police had come to their door with news that would shatter everything. "Look, I'm just the janitor, but I've mopped up enough tears to know when someone needs help." The stall door opened. A young woman stood there, maybe 25, with red eyes and a designer suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold onto her briefcase. "They think I killed someone," she whispered. "My own father's attorney just stood in that courtroom and barely tried to defend me. He threw the case. I know he did." James should have walked away. Should have kept mopping. Should have stayed invisible like janitors are supposed to be. But something in her eyes reminded him of his sister Carmen. That same look of someone innocent being crushed by a system that didn't care about the truth. "What's your name?" "Emily Thornton." The name hit him like a punch. Emily Thornton. As in Thornton Industries. As in the daughter of Robert Thornton, the CEO whose face was plastered on buildings across the city. James had cleaned the executive floors of Thornton Tower for years before transferring to courthouse duty. He'd seen her picture in the hallways, always smiling, always surrounded by family. "I know who you are," James said quietly. "Your father runs half this city." "My father wants me gone." Emily's voice cracked. "The attorney he hired, Richard Pemberton, is not just bad at his job. He's actively sabotaging my defense. I have proof I was nowhere near the victim when she died, but he won't present it. He keeps telling the jury things that make me look guilty. My own lawyer is destroying me." James felt something old and familiar rise in his chest. Rage. The same rage he'd felt watching his sister's public defender barely speak during her trial. The same rage that came from seeing the innocent crushed while the powerful walked free. "Show me what you've got." For the next 20 minutes, Emily spread documents across the bathroom counter. Security footage timestamps, phone records, credit card receipts. All of it showing she'd been 40 miles away when her former assistant, Jennifer Hayes, had died from a supposed poisoning at Emily's apartment. "Jennifer was my friend," Emily said, her voice breaking. "We worked together for 3 years. She knew things about my family's company, things that could ruin people. And now she's dead, and they're saying I killed her to keep her quiet." James studied the papers with the careful attention he'd learned from years of reading Carmen's case files late at night. The kind of attention that had taught him more about law than most people learned in college. "This timestamp here," he pointed to the security footage record. "It shows you entering a restaurant at 7:15. The medical examiner says Jennifer died between 7 and 8. Pemberton says the timestamp could be wrong, that I could have tampered with it. He won't even try to verify it with the restaurant's owner. Because he doesn't want to verify it," James said flatly. "Someone's paying him to make sure you go down." Emily looked at him with sudden hope, the first light he'd seen in her eyes. "You believe me?" "I believe the evidence. And I believe I've seen this before." The bathroom door swung open. A bailiff stuck his head in, frowning at James. "Rivera, what are you doing?" "Trial starting in 5 minutes." "Just finishing up," James said, already planning. Already remembering everything Carmen had taught him about fighting a rigged system. Already knowing what he had to do, even though it would cost him everything. Emily grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." James thought of Carmen, 22 years old, sitting in a cell for a crime she didn't commit because no one with power had cared enough to fight for her. Thought of all the nights he'd visited her, watched her spirit slowly die behind those bars until the pneumonia took her 3 years later. "Because somebody should have helped my sister," he said. And nobody did. The trial resumed 30 minutes later. James watched from the back of the courtroom as Richard Pemberton, A silver-haired man in a suit worth more than James earned in 6 months, Bailey questioned the prosecution's witnesses. Bailey objected to evidence. Bailey seemed to care that his client's life was being destroyed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Janet Morrison, painted Emily as a jealous, paranoid employer who'd poisoned Jennifer to prevent her from exposing financial crimes at Thornton Industries. She showed emails where Emily had argued with Jennifer about company records. Showed text messages where Emily had written, "You'll regret this," after Jennifer threatened to quit. Pemberton sat there, taking notes, saying nothing. James pulled out his phone and started recording. Started documenting. Started building his own case because clearly nobody else would. During the lunch recess, he followed Pemberton to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse. Watched him sit down across from a man in an expensive coat. Watched money change hands. Watched Pemberton nod and smile like they were old friends. James snapped pictures of everything. Back at the courthouse, he cornered Emily in the hallway outside the courtroom. "I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you trust me?" She looked at him like he was crazy, like he was her last chance. "What do you need?" "Get me copies of everything Pemberton has refused to present. Every piece of evidence is ignored. Every witness he hasn't called. Get me access to your father's company records if you can. And most importantly, get me Jennifer's personal laptop if the police still have it." "How am I supposed to do that? I'm on trial for murder. You're Robert Thornton's daughter. You've got resources even if it's turned against you. Use them." That evening, James didn't go home to his tiny apartment in Brooklyn. He went to the New York Public Library and spent 6 hours reading case law, studying rules of evidence, learning everything he could about attorney misconduct. His phone buzzed at midnight. Emily had sent him files. Hundreds of them. The security footage showed exactly what she'd said. Emily entering Marco's restaurant at 7:15, sitting down for dinner with 3 business associates, staying until 9:30. The restaurant owner had given a sworn statement confirming it, but Pemberton had never submitted it to the court. Phone records showed Jennifer making calls from Emily's apartment, but the cell tower data proved Jennifer had been alone. Emily's phone had been pinging towers 40 miles away all evening. And then James found something that made his blood run cold. Jennifer's laptop, which the police had supposedly examined and found nothing suspicious, contained emails between Jennifer and someone named RT. The emails discussed transferring money, hiding financial records, making problems disappear. RT Robert Thornton. Jennifer hadn't been Emily's victim. She'd been Robert Thornton's accomplice. And when she'd gotten scared and threatened to go to the authorities, someone had eliminated her. Someone with the power and resources to frame his own daughter for murder. James sat back in the library chair, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a bad attorney. This was a conspiracy. Robert Thornton had hired Pemberton to throw the case, had probably arranged for the evidence to be suppressed, had chosen his company's survival over his daughter's freedom. The question was, how did James prove it? He was a janitor, no law degree, no courtroom authority, no standing to even present evidence. In 3 days, the jury would deliberate and Emily would be convicted. She'd spend the rest of her life in prison for a murder her own father had probably ordered, unless James did something impossible. The next morning, James called in sick to work. Spent the day tracking down Marco, the restaurant owner, convincing him to come to court. Spent his evening printing documents, organizing evidence, preparing a case that no one had asked him to build. His supervisor called him at 10 that night. "Rivera, you've been with us 3 years. Never missed a day. What's going on?" "I need to take some personal time." "This about that Thornton trial? I heard you've been asking questions. People are talking. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. You'll lose your job. You'll lose everything." James thought of Carmen. Thought of the lawyer who'd barely spoken in her defense. Thought of how he'd promised her, in those final days before the pneumonia took her, that he'd never let another innocent person suffer the way she had. Some things are worth losing everything for. He hung up. "Where are you watching this from?" Drop your location in the comments because what happens next needs witnesses from every corner of this country. 6 years ago, James Rivera had been a different person. He'd worked construction, made decent money, had plans to maybe start his own business someday. He'd been helping his younger sister Carmen through community college, watching her study late into the night, dreaming of becoming a social worker. Then came a night that destroyed everything. Carmen had been working the closing shift at a convenience store in Queens when it got robbed. The owner, a man named Frank Chen who'd always been kind to her, was shot. Carmen called 911, tried to save him, held pressure on the wound while his blood soaked through her hands. The police arrested her 3 hours later. Someone had called in a tip. Said they'd seen Carmen arguing with Frank earlier that day. Said she'd been stealing from the register. Said she'd shot him when he confronted her. None of it was true, but the evidence told a convenient story. Carmen's fingerprints on the gun because she'd picked it up after the real killer dropped it. Gunpowder residue on her hand from trying to stop Frank's bleeding. Her DNA under his fingernails from when she'd grabbed him, begging him to stay alive. The public defender assigned to her case was overworked, underpaid, and already beaten down by a system that chewed up poor defendants and spit them out. He met with Carmen twice, told her to take a plea deal. When she refused, insisting she was innocent, he barely mounted a defense. The jury convicted her in 4 hours. James had spent every dollar he had on appeals. Hired private investigators who found the real killer, a junkie named Mike Torres who'd confessed to a cellmate. But Torres died of an overdose before they could get in to testify. The appeals went nowhere. Carmen went to Rikers. She lasted 3 years. The pneumonia that killed her started as a cough the guards ignored. By the time they got her to the medical unit, her lungs were already failing. James had held her hand through the plastic partition, watching her die, knowing she'd been innocent all along. He'd lost his construction job fighting for her, lost his apartment, lost everything except the crushing knowledge that the system had murdered his sister as surely as if they'd put a gun to her head. So he'd taken the only work he could get. Janitorial services. Started at Thornton Tower, mopping floors in offices where people made more in a day than he made in a year. Watched Robert Thornton stride through those halls like a king. Watched Emily follow behind him taking notes. Watched the machinery of wealth and power grind ordinary people into dust. Now, 3 years later, James lived in a studio apartment in East New York that cost half his paycheck. Ate ramen most nights. Rode the subway for 2 hours each way to get to the courthouse. Spent his free time reading law books from the library, trying to understand the system that had killed Carmen. He'd promised himself he'd never let it happen again. But getting involved in Emily's case was already costing him. His supervisor had made that clear. People were talking. The other janitors whispered when he walked past. Security guards watched him with suspicious eyes. Even the court clerks who used to joke with him now avoided eye contact. The trial continued. Day 3. Pemberton called no witnesses for the defense. Objected to nothing. Let the prosecution paint Emily as a monster without challenge. James sat in the gallery, his notebook full of observations. Watched the jury's faces grow harder with each damning piece of evidence. Watched Emily's shoulders slump further with each passing hour. Watched Robert Thornton, sitting in the front row, show no emotion at all. During afternoon recess, James approached one of the prosecutor's assistants in the hallway, a young guy named Kevin who James had chatted with before during his cleaning rounds. Hey Kevin, can I ask you something? Kevin looked nervous. I shouldn't be talking to you. People are saying you're helping the defense. I'm just asking questions. That footage from Marco's restaurant. Why didn't the defense present it? How do you know about that? It's in the discovery file. Public record. Shows Emily at dinner when Jennifer was killed. Kevin glanced around, then lowered his voice. Between us, we were shocked when Pemberton didn't use it. Morrison thought for sure he would. She had a whole counter-argument prepared, but he just never brought it up. Made our case a lot easier. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Strange? Man, half the defense attorneys in this building are overworked and incompetent. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't think it was convincing. Not my job to second-guess him. Kevin paused. Look, I like you, James, but you need to stay out of this. Whatever you think you're doing, it's going to blow back on you. Everyone kept warning him. Everyone kept telling him to stop. But James had learned something from Carmen's case. The only people who could fight for the innocent were the ones willing to sacrifice everything. That night, James received an email from an anonymous account. No message, just a video file. He opened it on his phone, hands shaking. The video showed Pemberton in his office, talking to Robert Thornton. The conversation was clear as day. "She is to be convicted," Robert said, his voice cold. "I don't care what it takes. Emily knows too much about the company's offshore accounts. If she stays free, if she gets desperate enough, she'll talk. I won't let her destroy everything I've built." "What about Jennifer's family? They're asking questions." "Jennifer was stealing from me, embezzling funds. When I confronted her, she threatened to claim I was the one breaking the law. I had no choice. You killed her. I protected my company, and now I'm protecting it from my daughter. Do your job, Richard. Make sure Emily goes to prison. I'll pay you triple your normal fee." Pemberton had nodded, shaken Robert's hand, agreed to destroy an innocent woman for money. James played the video 3 times, feeling sick. Then he called Emily. "I need to see you. Tonight. It's urgent." They met at a diner in Brooklyn at midnight. Emily looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Her hands still shook. Her eyes were hollow. "I got something," James said, sliding his phone across the table. "You need to see this." Emily watched the video. Her face went white, then red. Then she started crying, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. "My father," she whispered. "He killed Jennifer. He's framing me. His own daughter. And your lawyer is helping him do it." Emily put her head in her hands. "How do I fight this? Even with this video, who's going to believe a janitor over Robert Thornton? Who's going to take your word over a man who owns half this city?" James had been thinking about that all evening, had been planning, had been preparing for what came next. "Tomorrow in court, you need to fire Pemberton. Tell the judge you want to represent yourself." "I can't represent myself. I don't know anything about law." "But I do. 6 years of reading case files. 6 years of studying everything I could get my hands on. I can't officially be your lawyer, but I can help you, guide you, tell you what questions to ask." "James, they'll never allow it. The judge will appoint another attorney. Then you refuse the attorney. It's your constitutional right to represent yourself. The judge can't force you to accept counsel. And once you're representing yourself, you can call me as a witness. Put me on the stand. Let me present this evidence." Emily stayed at him. "You do that? Risk everything? For someone you barely know?" James thought of Carmen. Thought of her smile before the system broke her. Thought of all the promises he'd made to her cold grave. "Your father thinks he can buy his way out of justice. Thinks money and power mean he can murder someone and frame his own child. But there's one thing he didn't count on." "What's that?" "He didn't count on someone who has nothing left to lose." The next morning, James arrived at the courthouse early. Found his supervisor waiting for him by the janitor's closet. "Rivera, we need to talk. Building management got a call. Someone complained about you harassing witnesses, interfering with an active trial. I got orders to suspend you pending investigation." "Who complained?" "Does it matter? You crossed the line. You're done here." James pulled off his ID badge, set it on the supervisor's desk. "Then I guess I've got nothing to lose." He walked into that courtroom as a private citizen, sat in the gallery, watched Emily stand up when the judge called the court to order. "Your Honor," Emily said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "I need to make a motion. I'm firing my attorney. I wish to represent myself." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Pemberton stood up, objecting. Robert Thornton leaned forward in his seat, his face dark with rage. "Miss Thornton," the judge said sternly, "I strongly advise against this. You're facing life in prison. You need qualified counsel." "I had qualified counsel, Your Honor, and has been sabotaging my defense. I have evidence of attorney misconduct, and I intend to present it." "These are serious allegations. Do you have proof?" "I do, and I have a witness willing to testify to a conspiracy between my former attorney and my father to ensure my wrongful conviction." The judge looked at Pemberton, looked at Robert, looked back at Emily. "I'll allow you to represent yourself on the condition that you accept a legal advisor to sit with you. Someone to make sure you don't violate procedural rules." "I accept those terms." "And this witness you mentioned?" Emily pointed at James. "His name is James Rivera. He's been investigating this case independently. He has evidence that will prove my innocence and expose the real killer. Every head in the courtroom turned to look at James. He stood up slowly, feeling hundreds of eyes on him, feeling the weight of what came next. The prosecutor, Morrison, jumped to her feet. Your Honor, this is absurd. A janitor cannot be a witness in a murder trial. He has no expertise, no standing, no credentials. He has evidence, Emily said firmly. And under the rules of criminal procedure, I have the right to call any witness who has relevant testimony. The judge rubbed his temples. This trial has already been highly irregular. Miss Morrison, do you have grounds to prevent this testimony? Morrison looked at Pemberton, looked at Robert Thornton. Everyone in that courtroom could feel the power structure shifting, could feel something big and terrible about to break open. I need time to review this evidence, Morrison said carefully. Motion denied. If Miss Thornton wants to call this witness, she has that right. We'll hear his testimony tomorrow morning. The judge pointed his gavel at James. Mr. Rivera, I hope you know what you're getting yourself into. James nodded. He knew exactly what he was getting into. He was walking into the same system that had destroyed Carmen. But this time, he had evidence. This time, he had truth. This time, he wouldn't let the powerful win. That evening, James got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Rivera. Robert Thornton's voice was silk over steel. I understand you've involved yourself in my daughter's case. That's unwise. I'm offering you $50,000 to reconsider. Admit the video is fake. Walk away. Save yourself. Not interested. $100,000. Think about what you could do with that money. Think about your sister. About how you couldn't save her. You can't save Emily either. But you can save yourself. James felt his jaw clench. You don't get to talk about my sister. Everyone has a price, Mr. Rivera. Name yours. There isn't enough money in the world. He hung up. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers knocked on his door. They had a warrant for his arrest. Criminal trespassing. Harassment. Interfering with a trial. The charges were thin, barely legal, but enough to hold him overnight. Enough to keep him from testifying in the morning. James sat in the holding cell, watching the clock tick toward dawn, knowing Emily was alone, knowing the system was doing exactly what it had done to Carmen, crushing anyone who fought back. But James had spent 6 years preparing for this fight. 6 years learning every loophole, every rule, every way the system could be turned against itself. He had one phone call. He used it to call a friend from his construction days. A guy named Tommy Chen, Frank's nephew, who'd believed in Carmen's innocence, who'd helped James investigate, who'd become family in the years after Carmen died. Tommy, I need you to do something for me. Get to the courthouse. Find Emily Thornton. Tell her I sent you. And tell her exactly what to do. Like this video and subscribe if you believe the truth matters more than power. Drop a comment if you've ever seen the system crush someone innocent. Share this if you think justice should be for everyone, not just the wealthy. Check the description for updates as this story develops. Robert Thornton sat in his penthouse office 40 stories above Manhattan, looking down at the city he'd spent 30 years conquering. From up here, people looked like insects. Insignificant, easily crushed. He'd built Thornton Industries from nothing, turned a small manufacturing company into a billion-dollar empire. He'd done things along the way that weren't entirely legal. Moved money through offshore accounts. Paid people to look the other way. Made problems disappear. Jennifer Hayes had been one of those problems. She'd started as Emily's assistant 3 years ago. Smart girl. Too smart. She'd noticed discrepancies in the books. Started asking questions. Robert had brought her into his confidence. Made her complicit. Paid her enough to keep quiet. Then she'd gotten scared. Threatened to go to the SEC. Threatened to expose everything unless Robert cleaned up his business practices and came clean. Robert didn't clean up messes. He eliminated them. The poisoning had been clean. Professional. A chemical compound in her coffee that looked like a heart attack at first. By the time the medical examiner ran a talk screen, Robert had already planted evidence pointing to Emily. Had already hired Pemberton to ensure the conviction. It should have been simple. But now there was a janitor asking questions. A nobody with nothing to lose who'd somehow gotten his hands on evidence. Robert had tried money. Had tried threats. had tried having Rivera arrested. Nothing worked. The man wouldn't stop. Robert picked up his phone and made a call. I have a problem that needs to go away. Permanently. Name: James Rivera. Lives in East New York. Works as a janitor. Or used to. Is in holding right now at the 7th Precinct. I need him to have an accident. Tonight. Before he testifies. That'll cost extra. Cops are around. I don't care what it costs. Handle it. Robert hung up and poured himself a whiskey. Looked back out at the city. At the empire he'd built. At everything he'd sacrificed to get here. Emily had been a disappointment from the start. Too soft. Too moral. Always asking questions about where the money came from, how business really worked. She'd never understood that survival required ruthlessness. If she went to prison, it would be her own fault for being weak. Meanwhile, in a holding cell downtown, James sat on a concrete bench and went over the testimony in his head. He'd memorized every detail, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. He knew this case better than Pemberton knew it, better than Morrison knew it. All he needed was a chance to present it. The clock on the wall showed 3 in the morning. Court started at 9. The charges against him were bogus, but processing would take time. They designed this perfectly. He'd be stuck here for another 12 hours at least. Long enough to miss his testimony. Long enough for Emily's case to collapse. Unless Tommy came through. At 4 in the morning, a guard came to his cell. Rivera, you made bail. James looked up, surprised. I didn't call a bail bondsman. Someone posted it. You're free to go. Outside, Tommy was waiting in his truck. Your girl Emily came through. Apparently being Robert Thornton's daughter still counts for something at 4 in the morning. She posted your bail personally. How'd she manage that? She's supposed to be at home under court supervision. She called in a favor from a judge her father didn't get to yet. Old family friend. Someone who remembers when Robert Thornton wasn't a complete snake. James climbed into the truck, exhausted. Court starts in 5 hours. Then we'd better get you cleaned up and ready. You're about to go to war with one of the most powerful men in New York. Might want to shower first. They went to Tommy's apartment. James showered, changed into the one suit he owned, a cheap thing he'd bought for Carmen's funeral. Drank coffee and went over his testimony one more time. His phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. This one was simpler than the video. Just a photo. It showed Carmen's grave. Fresh flowers on it. And a note that read, "Back off or you'll join her." James stared at that photo for a long time. Felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. They'd gone after Carmen's memory. Threatened even her grave. Crossed a one line he'd never forgive. You okay? Tommy asked. They just made a mistake. They reminded me why I'm doing this. At 8:30, James walked into the courthouse. Emily was waiting in the hallway, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. Thank you for the bail money. I'll pay you back. Forget the money. Are you ready for this? I don't know. I've never represented myself before. Never questioned a witness. Never presented evidence to a jury. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. Tell your story. Ask the questions I wrote down. Let the truth do the work. And if the judge doesn't allow your testimony, then we adapt. But Emily, I need you to understand something. Once I take that stand, there's no going back. Your father is going to come after me with everything he has, and is going to come after you harder than before. We're about to make an enemy of one of the most powerful men in this city. Emily looked at him with clear eyes. Is already my enemy. He murdered my friend and framed me for it. The only question is whether I fight back or let him win. Then let's fight. The courtroom filled. The judge took his seat. The jury filed in, looking skeptical about the whole situation. Emily representing herself. A janitor about to testify. This case had become a circus. Morrison stood up first. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to renew our objection to this witness. Mr. Rivera has no expertise in forensic science, criminal investigation, or any relevant field. His testimony would be pure speculation. Your Honor, Emily said, her voice shaking but determined. Mr. Rivera doesn't need to be an expert. He's a fact witness. He has physical evidence to present and testimony about a conspiracy he personally observed. That's admissible under basic evidentiary rules. The judge considered. I'll allow the testimony. But Mr. Rivera, I'm warning you now. Stick to facts you personally observed. No speculation. No conspiracy theories. Just facts. Yes, Your Honor. James took the stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Emily approached him with her notes. Please state your name and occupation for the record. James Rivera. I'm currently unemployed. Previously worked as a janitor at this courthouse. How did you become involved in this case? I overheard Miss Thornton in the courthouse bathroom. She was distraught. I asked if she needed help. She told me she believed her attorney was sabotaging her defense. I offered to look at her evidence. Morrison jumped up. Objection. The defendant's statements to this witness are hearsay. I'm not offering them for the truth, Emily said quickly, just to explain how Mr. Rivera became involved. Overruled. Continue. What did you observe about my former attorney's conduct? James pulled out his notes. Richard Pemberton failed to present multiple pieces of exculpatory evidence. Security footage showing you at Marco's restaurant during the time of the murder. Phone records proving Jennifer Hayes was alone at your apartment. A sworn statement from the restaurant owner confirming your alibi. Cell tower data placing your phone 40 miles from the crime scene. Why would an attorney fail to present evidence that proves his client's innocence? Objection. Morrison shouted. Calls for speculation. Let me rephrase, Emily said. Did you observe anything that might explain why Mr. Pemberton didn't present this evidence? James pulled out his phone. I followed Mr. Pemberton during a lunch recess. I observed him meeting with a man and accepting what appeared to be payment. I took photographs. He handed the photos to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. The judge studied them carefully. Your Honor, Morrison said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. These photos prove nothing. Mr. Pemberton could have been having lunch with a friend. This is circumstantial at best. I also received a video, James said, from an anonymous source. The video shows a conversation between Mr. Pemberton and Robert Thornton discussing payment for throwing this case. The courtroom exploded. Robert Thornton stood up, his face purple with rage. This is a setup. That video is fabricated. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Thornton, sit down. Mr. Rivera, do you have this video? I do, Your Honor. I want it examined by a forensic expert before it's shown to the jury. Until then, this testimony is suspended. Court is in recess. Emily grabbed James's arm as they walked out. They're going to say it's fake. My father has enough money to hire experts who will say whatever he wants. Then we need more than the video. We need Jennifer's laptop. The police have it. It's evidence. But you're representing yourself now. You can file a motion to examine evidence. Request access to that laptop. If we can show those emails between Jennifer and your father, emails about embezzlement and cover-ups, the jury will have context for why he wanted her dead. They spent the lunch recess filing motions. By the time court resumed at 2, Emily had formal requests before the judge. Your Honor, I'm requesting access to Jennifer Hayes' personal laptop. The prosecution examined it, but I haven't been given the opportunity to conduct my own analysis. Morrison stood up. The laptop was examined by our forensic team. It contained nothing relevant to this case. Then the defense should be allowed to verify that. I'm entitled to examine all evidence used against me. The judge nodded. Motion granted. The laptop will be made available to Miss Thornton's technical expert for examination. Who will that expert be? Emily looked at James. He shook his head slightly. He wasn't a technical expert, but he knew someone who was. I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with my advisor, Your Honor. You have 30 minutes. Outside, James called Tommy again. I need a favor. A big one. Remember your cousin Ray? The one who does computer forensics. Yeah, works for some private investigation firm. Why? Get him to the courthouse. Now, tell him to bring his equipment. We've got one shot at this and it needs to happen today. Ray Chen showed up 40 minutes later with a laptop bag and a skeptical expression. Tommy says you need a laptop analyzed. For a murder trial. Today. That's right. Normal forensic analysis takes days. Weeks sometimes. We don't have weeks. We have hours. Maybe less. Can you look for specific emails? One's between Jennifer Hayes and someone with the initials RT. Ray pulled out his equipment. If they are there, I'll find them. But if your opposition has already scrubbed the drive, there might not be anything to recover. Jennifer's laptop arrived under police escort. Ray plugged it in and started working while James and Emily sat in an empty conference room, watching the clock tick down. Robert Thornton's power was crushing them from every angle. The system was designed to protect men like him. But somewhere on that laptop was the truth. Somewhere in those files was proof of what really happened. Ray worked in silence for 2 hours, ran programs James didn't understand, pulled up screens full of code and data. Finally, he sat back, found something. James leaned over his shoulder. On the screen were emails, hundreds of them. Communications between Jennifer and someone called RT, discussions of offshore accounts, wire transfers, instructions to hide financial records from auditors. And in the most recent emails, dated 3 days before Jennifer's death, a threat. "I can't do this anymore," Jennifer had written. "I'm going to the authorities. You need to come clean before this destroys everyone." RT's response was chilling. "You're making a mistake. Think very carefully about your next move. Some mistakes can't be undone." 2 days later, Jennifer was dead. Ray looked at James. "This is it. This is motive. But you know what else I found? Deleted security footage from the apartment building. Somebody tried to scrub it, but I recovered it." He pulled up a video file. Grainy footage from Jennifer's building. The timestamp showed 7:20 on the night she died. A man in an expensive coat entered the building. The angle was bad, but the build was right. The walk was right. It was Robert Thornton. Another video showed him leaving 30 minutes later. Alone. Calm. "He was there," Emily whispered. "My father was in Jennifer's apartment when she died." "More than that," Ray said. "Look at this." He zoomed in on Robert's hand as he left the building. "Is holding something. A coffee cup. I bet if you check the toxicology report, the poison was in coffee." James felt his heart pounding. This was it. This was everything they needed. Not just motive but opportunity. Not just suspicion but proof. "Can you present this in court?" he asked Ray. "I'm not an attorney, but I can testify to what I found. Sign an affidavit. Whatever you need." James looked at Emily. "We go back in there right now. We put Ray on the stand. We show the jury everything. And we watch your father's empire burn." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Let's end this." They walked back into that courtroom at 5 in the evening. The judge looked tired and irritated. The jury looked confused. Robert Thornton looked confident, like he'd already won. "Your Honor," Emily said, "the defense calls Raymond Chen as an expert witness in computer forensics." Morrison objected. "We weren't notified of this witness. He just completed his analysis an hour ago. The defense is entitled to present newly discovered evidence." "I'll allow it," the judge said. "But this better be relevant, Miss Thornton. The hour is late." Ray took the stand, explained his credentials, explained his analysis. Then Emily asked the question that would change everything. "What did you find on Jennifer Hayes' laptop?" "I found extensive email correspondence between Ms. Hayes and someone identified as RT, later confirmed to be Robert Thornton. The emails discuss illegal financial activities, offshore accounts, and efforts to hide company funds from federal auditors." The jury leaned forward. Morrison went pale. "I also found deleted security footage from Miss Hayes' apartment building. Footage showing Robert Thornton entering the building at 7:20 on the night of the murder and leaving 30 minutes later." Robert Thornton stood up. "This is a lie. Those files were planted." "Mr. Thornton, sit down," the judge ordered. "I can provide the metadata," Ray continued. "The creation dates, the deletion dates. Everything proves these files were original to the laptop. Nothing was planted or fabricated." Emily looked at her father, looked at the man who tried to destroy her. "Your Honor, I move for dismissal of all charges against me, and I formally request that the district attorney investigate Robert Thornton for the murder of Jennifer Hayes." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Morrison was shouting. Pemberton had disappeared. Robert Thornton was being restrained by court officers. The judge was banging his gavel so hard James thought it might break. But through it all, Emily stood firm. And James stood beside her. They'd done it. They'd fought the system and won. Or so they thought. Because that night, as James walked out of the courthouse, a car pulled up beside him. Two men in suits got out. James Rivera, FBI. We need to talk about some evidence you've been handling. Evidence that might have been obtained illegally. Evidence that might make you an accessory to some serious crimes. James felt his stomach drop. Robert Thornton wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The powerful never went down without taking everyone around them with them. If you've ever wondered whether one person can fight the system, drop a comment. Subscribe because this story isn't over yet. Share this with anyone who believes truth matters. Check the description for what happens next. The FBI interview room was gray walls and fluorescent lights. James sat across from two agents who looked tired and skeptical in equal measure. Let's be clear about something, Mr. Rivera, the older agent said. His name was Walsh, and he had the face of someone who'd seen too many people lie to him. That video of Robert Thornton and Richard Pemberton conspiring. You obtained it from an anonymous source. You accessed the defendant's evidence without proper authorization. You conducted an investigation without any legal standing. In some jurisdictions, that could be considered obstruction of justice. James kept his hands flat on the table, kept his voice steady. I was helping an innocent woman prove her defense attorney was sabotaging her case. Nothing I did was illegal. That's debatable. But here's what's not debatable. Robert Thornton has filed a formal complaint. He's claiming you fabricated evidence, harassed his family, and interfered with a trial. He's got lawyers filing civil suits against you right now. Defamation. Emotional distress. They're going after everything you have. I don't have anything. Then they'll go after everything you might have. Your future earnings. Any assets you acquire. They'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in debt. The younger agent, a woman named Torres, leaned forward. But that's not why we're here. We've been investigating Thornton Industries for 2 years. Financial crimes, money laundering, everything you uncovered on that laptop, we already knew about it. We've been building a case. James looked at her, surprised. Then why haven't you arrested him? Because we needed proof. Solid evidence that would hold up in court. You just handed it to us. Those emails Ray Chen recovered. The security footage. That's enough for us to move forward. Torres paused. But we need your cooperation. We need you to testify before a grand jury. Tell them everything you know. Everything you found. And if I do, then we'll make sure Thornton's lawyers don't destroy your life. We'll protect you from his civil suits. We'll make sure you come out of this intact. Walsh nodded. But you need to understand something. Robert Thornton has resources you can't imagine. He's already hired crisis management firms. Lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. PR team spinning this as a setup. He's going to try to discredit you in every way possible. Let him try. He's also dangerous. Men like Thornton don't accept losing. If he can't destroy you legally, he might try other methods. James thought of the photo of Carmen's grave. The threat. The way Robert had tried to have him arrested before he could testify. I know. Then we'll provide protection. Safe house if necessary. New identity if it comes to that. I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I did nothing wrong. Torres exchanged a glance with Walsh. That's admirable. It's also potentially suicidal. But it's your choice. They talked for 3 more hours. Went over every detail of James's investigation. Every piece of evidence. Every observation. By the time they let him go, it was midnight. Tommy was waiting outside in his truck. You okay? Yeah. FBI want me to testify against Robert Thornton. Help them build their case. You going to do it? What choice do I have? We opened this door. Now we have to walk through it. They drove to Tommy's apartment. James crashed on the couch, too exhausted to even take off his shoes. But he couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying everything. Carmen's trial. Emily's case. The moment he decided to get involved. Had he done the right thing? Or had he just painted a target on his back for nothing? At 3 in the morning, his phone rang. Emily. James, I'm at the hospital. My father, he tried to kill himself. Overdose. They found him in his office. James sat up. Is he alive? Yes. They are pumping his stomach now. But James, before the ambulance came, he gave a statement to the police. He confessed. Said he killed Jennifer. Said he framed me. Said Pemberton helped him. He confessed to everything. Why would he do that? The board forced him out. His investors abandoned him. The press is destroying him. Everything he built is collapsing. I think he realized he lost. Emily's voice cracked. He's my father. I should feel something. But all I feel is empty. You feel what you feel. There's no wrong way to process this. The district attorney called. They are dropping all charges against me. I'm free. Because of you. Because you wouldn't stop. James felt something unknot in his chest. You did this. You stood up. You fought back. I just helped. No, you saved my life. And I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't need to thank me. Just live a good life. Be happy. That's enough. They talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. James sat in the dark, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Carmen was gone. Emily was free. Robert Thornton was destroyed. Justice, of a sort, had been served. But James knew better than to think this was over. The next morning, the newspapers ran the story. Tech billionaire confesses to murder. CEO frames own daughter. Janitor exposes conspiracy. The media ate it up. Jamesy's face was everywhere. His story splashed across every front page. He became a hero overnight. A symbol of ordinary people fighting back against corrupt power. Reporters camped outside Tommy's apartment. Strangers recognized him on the street. Someone started a fundraising page to help pay his legal bills. Within 24 hours, it had raised over $200,000. James didn't know how to process any of it. A week later, Emily called him again. I'm testifying at my father's trial. They moved fast because of his confession. I want you there, if you're willing. Of course. The trial was brief. Robert Thornton, broken and medicated, barely spoke. His lawyers tried to argue diminished capacity, mental illness, business stress. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession was clay. The jury convicted him in 3 hours. Emily stood up during victim impact statements. Looked at her father, sitting at the defense table with his head down. You taught me that success meant ruthlessness, she said, her voice steady. That compassion was weakness. That ordinary people didn't matter. You taught me to value money over humanity, power over integrity. She paused. It took losing everything to realize how wrong you were. Jennifer Hayes mattered. James Rivera matters. Every person you crushed building your empire mattered. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Robert looked up at her then. For a moment, James saw something like regret in his eyes. Then it was gone. The judge sentenced him to 25 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Emily. She gave a brief statement about justice and accountability, then pushed through the crowd to where James waited. What are you going to do now? She asked. I don't know. Haven't really thought about it. I have a job for you, if you want it. What kind of job? I'm starting a foundation. The Jennifer Hayes Justice Initiative. We're going to help people who've been failed by the legal system. Provide resources for defendants who can't afford good lawyers. Investigate cases where attorney misconduct might have led to wrongful convictions. Fight for the people nobody else fights for. Emily looked at him seriously. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands what it's like to be powerless. Someone who won't give up. James felt his throat tighten. I'm not qualified for that. You're the most qualified person I know. You took on one of the most powerful men in the city with nothing but determination and truth. That's exactly what this work requires. I don't have a law degree. Then we'll get you one. I'll pay for law school. You can work for the foundation part-time while you study. 3 years from now, you'll be an attorney. A real one, with the power to change the system from inside. James thought about it. Thought about Carmen. Thought about all the people like her who'd been crushed by a system designed to protect the powerful. Okay, he said. I'll do it. The foundation launched 3 months later. Emily had used her family's remaining assets, liquidated before the criminal seizures, to fund it. The Jennifer Hayes Justice Initiative opened offices in Manhattan and Brooklyn, hired paralegals, investigators, and attorneys who believed in the work. James started law school at night. Spent his days reviewing cases, interviewing clients, learning the system from the inside. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. But for the first time since Carmen died, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Richard Pemberton was disbarred. The video of his conspiracy with Robert Thornton played over and over in disciplinary hearings. He lost everything. Last James heard, he was working as a paralegal in New Jersey, blacklisted from ever practicing law again. The prosecutor, Morrison, reached out to James personally, apologized for not seeing what was happening, said she'd been too focused on winning to notice justice was being subverted. That happens a lot, James told her. The system rewards winning, not truth. Conviction rates, not justice. We need to change that. How? By never forgetting that behind every case is a real person. Someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's life. Morrison nodded. I'll try to remember that. 6 months after the trial, James visited Carmen's grave, placed flowers on the headstone, sat in the grass and told her everything that had happened. I kept my promise, he said quietly. I didn't let it happen again. Emily's free. Robert's in prison. The system didn't win this time. He paused, feeling tears on his face. I wish you were here to see it. You'd be proud, I think. You always said I should fight. That good people had to stand up. I finally listened. A breeze rustled the leaves above him. James sat there for a long time, feeling close to his sister in a way he hadn't since she died. Feeling like maybe, finally, he'd done right by her memory. The foundation grew. Within a year, they'd helped overturn 3 wrongful convictions, exposed 2 more cases of attorney misconduct, provided defense resources to dozens of defendants who otherwise would have had no chance. James finished his first year of law school at the top of his class. His professors were impressed by his practical knowledge, his understanding of how the system really worked. They wanted him to go into academia, to teach. But James had other plans. He was going to be the kind of lawyer Carmen never had, the kind who fought for truth instead of victory, who valued justice over career advancement, who remembered that every client was someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone who mattered. Emily and James became close friends. Not romantic, but something deeper. 2 people who'd survived hell together and came out believing in something better. She offered him equity in the foundation, a real stake in the work they were doing. Partners, she said, equal voices in every decision. Your name on the letterhead. Why? Because none of this would exist without you. Because you saved my life when you had every reason to walk away. Because I trust you to keep me honest. To remind me why we're doing this. James accepted. The Rivera-Thornton Justice Initiative. It had a nice ring to it. 2 years passed. James graduated law school, passed the bar on his first try, became an attorney officially, with all the power and responsibility that came with it. His first case as a licensed lawyer was defending a young man accused of armed robbery. A kid from Brooklyn who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose public defender was overworked and underprepared. James looked at that kid across the table in their first meeting and saw Carmen. Saw himself. Saw every innocent person crushed by a system that didn't care. I'm going to fight for you, he said. Not because I think I can win, but because you deserve someone in your corner who won't quit. Who'll dig for truth even when it's buried. Who believes your life matters. The kid, 19 years old with scared eyes, nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're free. James won that case. Proved the eyewitness identification was wrong. Showed the police had coerced the kid's confession. Got the charges dismissed. It was the first of many victories. Years later, when reporters asked James about his career, about how he'd gone from janitor to one of New York's most respected defense attorneys, he always gave the same answer. I had a sister named Carmen. The system failed her, and I promised her I'd make sure it didn't fail anyone else if I could help it. Everything I do, every case I take, every person I defend, is keeping that promise. And when they asked Emily about why she'd given up her family's fortune to fight for justice, she smiled and said, I had a friend named Jennifer, and I had a stranger named James who taught me what real courage looks like. This is how I honor them both. The foundation continues today. Bigger now, more resources, more attorneys, more victories, but the mission remains the same. Fight for truth. Fight for justice. Fight for the powerless against the powerful. Never quit. Never compromise. Never forget that every person deserves dignity and a fair chance. James thinks about Carmen often, wishes she could see what her death inspired. Wishes she knew that her suffering wasn't meaningless, that it sparked something that would help thousands of people she'd never meet. Late at night in his office, when he's preparing for a trial, he sometimes feels her presence. Hears her voice telling him not to give up. Feels her hand on his shoulder pushing him forward. "I miss you," he whispers to the empty room. "Every day. But I'm doing the work. I'm keeping the promise. I hope that means something." He believes it does. Like this and subscribe if you believe one person can change the world. Comment below if this story inspired you to stand up for what's right. Share this with anyone fighting their own battle against injustice. Hit the notification bell because stories like this need to be heard. Check the description for resources if you need legal help or want to support justice reform. 3 years after Robert Thornton's conviction, the Appellate Division of the New York Supreme Court held a special hearing. Unusual, unprecedented, really, but the case had garnered national attention, and the court wanted to address some lingering questions publicly. James sat at the defense table, now a licensed attorney, representing Emily in a wrongful prosecution claim against the city. Next to him, Emily looked calm and determined. Across the room, Morrison sat with the city's legal team, looking uncomfortable but resigned. The chief judge, a woman named Williams with 30 years on the bench, looked down at them with sharp eyes. "This case has raised serious questions about our justice system," she began. "How did a conspiracy of this magnitude go unnoticed for so long? How did attorney misconduct reach this level without intervention? Most importantly, what reforms can prevent this from happening again?" James stood to address the court. "Your Honor, with respect, these questions have simple answers. The system prioritizes efficiency over truth, conviction rates over justice. It rewards prosecutors who win and punishes defense attorneys who fight too hard. It creates incentives for misconduct and penalties for integrity." Morrison stood up, her face flushed. "Your Honor, the prosecution acted in good faith throughout this case. We had no reason to suspect the defense attorney was sabotaging his own client." "Except you did," James said firmly. "You knew the alibi evidence existed. You knew the timestamps didn't match. You knew there were inconsistencies. But winning was more important than investigating those inconsistencies." "That's not fair, Counselor." "No. What's not fair is that my sister died in prison for a crime she didn't commit because her lawyer didn't care enough to fight. What's not fair is that Emily Thornton nearly spent her life behind bars because the system was easier to corrupt than it was to trust. What's not fair is that thousands of innocent people are sitting in cells right now because nobody with power cares enough to check whether justice is really being served." The courtroom went silent. Judge Williams leaned forward. "What would you have us do, Mr. Rivera? How do we fix a system that's broken?" "We start by acknowledging it's broken. We create oversight for defense attorneys to ensure they're actually defending their clients. We punish prosecutors who hide evidence or ignore inconsistencies. We make it easier for convicted people to access their case files and evidence. We fund public defenders properly so they have time to actually investigate cases. And we stop measuring justice by conviction rates and start measuring it by whether we got the truth." Emily stood beside him. "I'd like to add something, Your Honor. My father corrupted the system because it was easy to corrupt, because money could buy outcomes, because power could silence truth. If we want real change, we need to remove money from the equation. Public funding for all criminal defense. Strict limits on what private attorneys can charge. Make it impossible for wealth to buy different justice than poverty gets." Judge Williams nodded slowly. "These are ambitious proposals. They would require legislative action, funding, political will. They require caring," James said. "They require believing that justice matters more than efficiency, that truth matters more than victory, that human lives matter more than statistics." The judge looked at him for a long moment. Then she made her ruling. The city would pay Emily Thornton $12 million in damages for wrongful prosecution. Half of that would go to the Jennifer Hayes Justice Initiative. The other half would fund a new oversight board to investigate attorney misconduct and wrongful convictions. More importantly, the judge issued a formal recommendation to the state legislature calling for reforms in public defense funding, prosecutor accountability, and access to post-conviction evidence. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Emily gave a statement, thanking everyone who'd supported the foundation, honoring Jennifer's memory, calling for continued reform. Then she stepped aside and let James speak. 3 years ago, I was a janitor with no power and no voice. Today, I'm an attorney with resources and a platform. But I'm still the same person, still driven by the same anger at injustice, still fighting for people the system has forgotten. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. If you've been wrongly convicted, contact us. If you think your attorney didn't fight for you, contact us. If you've been crushed by a system that values power over truth, contact us. We can't help everyone, but we'll try, because that's what justice requires. Not perfection, just effort, just caring enough to try. The Foundation's phone lines lit up that night. Hundreds of calls. People who'd been waiting for someone to listen, to care, to fight. James and his team worked through the night, taking statements, reviewing cases, identifying which ones they could help with. By dawn, they'd added 32 new cases to their docket. It was overwhelming. Impossible, really. But James had learned something from fighting Robert Thornton. Impossible just meant nobody had cared enough to try yet. 6 months later, the Foundation opened a second office in Philadelphia, then Chicago, then Los Angeles. Other cities reached out, wanting to replicate the model. Law students volunteered. Retired attorneys offered their time. People who'd been helped by the Foundation donated money to help others. The movement grew. Emily stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on policy work. She testified before Congress, appeared on news programs, wrote op-eds calling for criminal justice reform. She used her family name, tarnished as it was, to open doors and start conversations. James stayed on the ground, tried cases, fought for clients, trained young attorneys in the Foundation's methods. He refused to become disconnected from the work, refused to forget what it felt like to be powerless. One evening, 5 years after Robert Thornton's conviction, James received a letter. No return address, just a note inside. I was wrongly convicted 15 years ago. Spent every day since trying to prove my innocence. Your foundation helped me. Got my case reviewed. Found new evidence. Yesterday, a judge overturned my conviction. I'm going home. My children will know their mother. Because of you. Because you cared when nobody else did. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. But thank you. James sat at his desk, holding that letter, crying openly for the first time in years. This was why. This was the point of everything. These moments when the system actually worked. When justice actually happened. When truth mattered more than power. He thought about Carmen. Wished he could have saved her. But he'd saved others. Would keep saving others. For as long as he had strength and breath. That night, James visited Carmen's grave again. The headstone had new words engraved below her name. Words he'd added after passing the bar. Carmen Rivera. Sister. Inspiration. The reason we fight. I've helped a lot of people because of you, he said quietly. Dozens freed from wrongful convictions. Hundreds with better representation. Thousands learning that the system can work if someone pushes hard enough. None of it brings you back. But I hope it means something. I hope wherever you are, you're proud. The wind rustled the leaves. James felt that familiar presence. That sense of Carmen standing beside him, hand on his shoulder. I'm not stopping, he promised her. Not ever. As long as there's someone innocent in a cell, someone powerless facing the system alone, someone who needs a fighter in their corner, I'll be there. That's my promise to you. That's how I honor your memory. 10 years after Robert Thornton's trial, the Foundation had helped overturn 147 wrongful convictions. The number seemed impossible, but each one represented a real person, a real life saved, a real family reunited. Emily married eventually, a public interest lawyer she met through the Foundation's work. They had 2 children, named their daughter Jennifer. James never married, devoted his life to the work, to the mission. Some people called him obsessed. He called it committed. The Rivera-Thornton Justice Initiative became a model for similar organizations across the country. Law schools taught case studies based on their methods. Prosecutors and judges referenced their recommendations in reform discussions. The work continued to grow and evolve. Robert Thornton died in prison 7 years into his sentence. Heart attack. James felt nothing when he heard. No satisfaction. No closure. Just a sense of waste. A brilliant man who'd chosen greed over integrity, power over humanity. Who'd destroyed lives, including his own daughters, in pursuit of an empire that meant nothing in the end. Emily went to his funeral. James went with her for support. "I forgave him," she said at the graveside. "Not because he deserved it, but because carrying that anger was destroying me. He made terrible choices, hurt people I loved, tried to destroy me. But he was still my father, still a human being who suffered. I can acknowledge that while still condemning what he did." James understood. He'd spent years being angry at the system that killed Carmen, at the lawyer who didn't fight for her, at the prosecutors who cared more about winning than truth. Eventually, he'd learned to channel that anger into action instead of bitterness. The work was the thing. The fighting was the thing. The never giving up was the thing. 15 years after that day in the courthouse bathroom when James first heard Emily crying, he received an award from the State Bar Association, Attorney of the Year, for his work reforming the criminal justice system and fighting for the wrongly convicted. Emily introduced him at the ceremony, told the story of how a janitor had saved her life, how he'd fought a corrupt system and won, how he'd turned personal tragedy into a movement for justice. James Rivera could have walked away, she said to the crowd of lawyers and judges and officials. He had every reason to ignore my crying in that bathroom, to stay invisible, to protect himself. But he chose to fight, chose to risk everything for a stranger, chose truth over safety. And because of that choice, hundreds of innocent people are free today. Hundreds of families are whole again. The system is just a little bit more just. James stood to accept the award, looked out at the audience, saw faces of attorneys he'd trained, clients he'd freed, people who devoted their lives to the same work. "I don't deserve this," he said honestly. "I did what anyone should do when they see injustice. I fought back." The real heroes are the people who endure wrongful conviction with dignity, who maintain innocence even when the world calls them guilty, who never stop believing truth matters. He held up the award. "This belongs to my sister Carmen, who taught me that the system needs fighters. To Jennifer Hayes, whose death exposed corruption. To Emily Thornton, who had the courage to trust a janitor. And to everyone still in a cell tonight who shouldn't be. We haven't forgotten you. We're still fighting. We won't stop." The audience stood. The applause lasted 5 minutes. Later that night, alone in his office, James looked at the awards sitting on his desk, looked at the photo of Carmen he kept next to his computer, looked at the stack of case files waiting for his attention. Tomorrow there would be more trials, more clients, more fights. The work never ended. Justice was never finished. But every victory mattered. Every person freed made the struggle worthwhile. James Rivera had started as a janitor who cleaned up other people's messes. He'd become an attorney who cleaned up the system's messes. The job was different, but the mission was the same. Make things right. Fight for truth. Never quit. He thought about that day in the courthouse bathroom. The moment he decided to help Emily. The choice that had changed everything. Would he make the same choice again, knowing everything it would cost? The threats, the danger, the years of struggle, without hesitation, every single time. Because some things matter more than safety, more than comfort, more than self-preservation. Justice matters. Truth matters. Human dignity matters. And someone has to fight for those things, even when the odds are impossible, even when the powerful push back, even when the system itself is the enemy. James had learned that from Carmen, had proven it with Emily, would keep proving it for the rest of his life. The office lights flickered. Time to go home. Time to rest. Tomorrow would bring new fights, new challenges, new people who needed someone in their corner. James gathered his files. Looked one more time at Carmen's photo. "Sleep well, sis. I've got the watch tonight. I'll keep fighting. Always." He turned off the lights and locked the door. Outside, the city sprawled before him. Millions of people. Thousands of injustices. hundreds of cases waiting to be fought. James smiled, not because the work was easy, but because it was worth doing. And he'd proven, beyond any doubt, that one person could make a difference, could change the system, could fight the powerful and win. All it took was courage, conviction, and the refusal to walk away when someone needed help. James Rivera, the janitor who became an attorney, the man who saved Emily Thornton and reformed the justice system, walked into the night ready for whatever came next. The fight continued. The work went on. Justice, slowly but surely, prevailed. And somewhere, he knew, Carmen was smiling. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Drop a comment telling us about a time you stood up for what was right, or someone who inspired you to fight for justice. Share this story with everyone you know because these messages need to spread. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Check the description below for ways to support real justice reform organizations and help people who need advocates. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people and maybe, just maybe, inspires someone else to be the change the world needs. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for believing that justice matters. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right.